Hey everybody, Stu here from Sierra Sewing, Quilting, and Vacuums, and we are working on our Shop Hop pumpkin today. I think it turned out adorable. So anyway, here's how it goes together. We're gonna start with our middle and we're gonna make half square triangles into a pinwheel. So all we're gonna do, we've got our background square and we're gonna pair that up with our red square. I'm gonna draw a diagonal line down the center of our background square. Once it's paired up with the red, I'm gonna sew a 1/4 inch on each side of those, cut down the middle, and that is going to give us our half square triangles. Square that up. These started out to be 2 3/8, so you're gonna square that up to 2 inches. So perfect 2 inches. And then you're gonna pair those up. I always have to kind of mess around with it, but you're gonna sew those together into pairs. Again, form it like a pinwheel. It's gonna go like so. I pressed everything toward the red so that when it's all said and done together, these two seam allowances are gonna oppose each other. Then all I have to do is match up that center seam. I'm gonna come in here, fold that together. I press this one toward the red block, this one toward the red block. So now these go opposite directions. I'm just gonna take a pin, insert that inside that intersection, make sure it comes out the same way so that when I sew that, I'm gonna sew right across that intersection and it's gonna give me that perfect point in the middle that I like, okay? So that's our center pinwheel. Set those aside for a minute. So next we've got our flying geese that go around that center pinwheel. So with this one, again, with the yellow, I drew a diagonal line down the center of that. This time we're actually gonna sew on the center line. So I'm gonna take my first side, I'm gonna sew diagonally, and then I'm gonna fold that back. I always like to make sure that reaches all the way across before I actually cut that, because if I missed, I wanna fix that before I trim those off. I'm gonna do the first side, then I'm gonna come down the other way. Here, I've got one already sewn. So once this is sewn, I'm gonna fold this back, make sure that that matches up the way I want. Then I'm gonna trim that other side back. And then I can come down the second side. Again, stitching on the line. I'm gonna fold that back. And then once I make sure that it matches up with the background, I am going to, oops, this one kind of flipped over. But I can just, with my scissors, trim that out to about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I've got that cute little flying geese unit. I'm gonna make 4 of those. Let's make some room here. So once I have my pinwheel center, we'll pretend this one's sewn together. And then I'm going to put my little star points around the edge. Like so. Let's keep my pumpkin over here. And then the last thing, I've got 2 inch squares that I'm gonna put in each of the corners here. To complete that cute little sawtooth star, just like that. What do you think? So that's the whole centerpiece of my pumpkin here. All right, the next section, I've got, these are 2.5 by 6.5 inch rectangles of just the orange. And again, once I get the seam allowance out of here, that is gonna just fit perfectly. Slide this down, make a little room here. So I've got my 2.5 by 6.5 rectangles on each side. And then the last piece is gonna be the outside edges. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take a 3.5 by 12.5 inch, or 3.5 by 10.5 inch rectangle of the orange. And I'm gonna add a 2.5 inch square on each end, like so. Again, sewing on the line, I'm gonna fold that back and then trim off the excess. Like so, and you'll do that on both of the outside corners. And I'm gonna do that on 2 sides. So that is going to make the pumpkin part of the pumpkin. Oh, that's upside down, that won't do. Okay, and again, once the seam allowances are out of it, it's gonna look much better. What do you think? So now all that's left is my stem. Give me just a second and we'll talk about how that goes together. Okay, so now we're gonna do our whole little stem and leaf unit we have here. So we'll start with our cute little leaf. This is a 1 3/4 inch square, and we just sewed a 1 inch background square, again, diagonally down the center, flip that back, and that is making this cute little leaf. And then to fill in the top, it's a 1 3/4 by 1 1/2 inch rectangle to fill that in. And that's a little bit oversized, so when it's all said and done, you can trim it down if you need to, okay? But that's this little guy here. And then for the actual stem part, for this main piece, we're gonna start, this is a 2 inch by 3 1/4 inch rectangle, okay? Then I've got a 2 inch square that I'm gonna sew diagonally to the side, and on the other side, it's a 1 1/2 inch square, so a little bit smaller, but that's gonna give me the angle on that stem. So again, I'm just gonna sew that diagonally, flip them back, press, and trim off the excess. So now I've got this part. For the bottom edge, what we did was we took, again, oops, go this way, a 3 1/4 inch rectangle of the brown by 1 inch, and then a 1 inch by 2 inch piece of the white. And I'm gonna take that, and what I wanna do is I'm gonna match up this seam, and I wanna stagger it enough so that that matches nicely. Get rid of that cute little thread there, so that this angle meets up the way it's supposed to. And this over here doesn't matter because that's gonna be in the seam allowance, okay? So it'll be excess on each side. So, but once that middle is matched, I'm gonna sew that with the 1/4 inch seam all the way across, and then just trim those off wherever that flies, okay? Because sometimes with that angle, it's a little bit tricky to measure out exactly where that's gonna land. But that's gonna give you this big center piece. I'm gonna add the leaf to the side there, just like that. And then again, on each side, I've got a 2 1/2 by, I cut it 4 1/2, but again, that's kind of big. I'm gonna sew that with a 1/4 inch seam on each side of that stem. And if there's excess coming off the sides, I will trim that up so the whole thing measures 2 1/2 by 12 1/2. And then I'm just gonna add that to my pumpkin that I already have put together. And there he is. Pretty fun, huh? All right, thanks so much, and we will see you next time.